Welcome everybody to First Responder Friday. We have a really good setup today. We're going to talk about, are you here to help somebody in crisis? And we're going to talk about what does help look like? And what does that mean for somebody that's in crisis? So why that's so important is because, when we have our first responders and we're dealing with people in crisis, we're often talking about de-escalation and those type of things. And we want to talk about, building rapport and trust and those type of things, but it's going to be really easy when we talk about that word help and what does that look like. So that H is going to be talking about things like humbling ourselves, and that E is empathizing with people that might be in crisis. That L means listening, right? And that last piece is that P is that patience, and that's key. So we're going to bring those pieces of the puzzle together. And every day we talk about people in this country are in crisis. And this group is talking about this A.W.A.R.E project, which is we are looking for, are we aware of religious and spiritual experiences? And we're bringing this whole puzzle together. So I'm going to turn this over to you guys. And at the end, we're going to have time for questions. And I want you to introduce your special guest, Emily, as well today, that you brought on last minute. Thank you very much.
That's a great lead in. This next step is I will brief on my 911 call in 2005. I will also then introduce Emily on her 988 call in 2023. We'll see some commonalities and we'll see some connections to what Carlito just said on why are we talking about the help model. It is simplistic. I'm going to say you all know this. Everybody on this call, this is not new. But we're trying to promote the most simplistic model that really does help from lived experience. So I'm going to start. Some of you who have been on here before, you've heard my story. You can hear it. If you email me, I'll send you the documentary and process. So I'm going to keep mine simple. But I'm going to start with, I watched a 988 webinar just 2 days ago. Dr. Rupi, I'll send you her information. But in the hour, one of the things she said of all the 988 calls she's been trying to help and support, she actually said something that I related to. She said a lot of the callers, I would be a caller, people who are calling for help, actually found themselves in the position to calm the call taker down or calm the first responder down. Now, I don't know if any of you even relate to that or even could make sense out of that, but that's what I did in 2005. And when I heard this on Dr. Rupi's webinar, I'm like, yes, some of us who are in such extreme stress, if we see the helper in stress, and for me, I was guided by God. I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I need to calm the call taker down so that I can at least survive this scenario. So here's my brief. We're going to use the help model. In 2005, my mother called 911. She called out of fear. She thought I was having a breakdown. And why would she think that? Because 25 years before, I was mislabeled manic depressive in a situational scenario, going through a divorce as a young 20-year-old. And I did have some anxiety, let's say. I was mislabeled then. I was put in a psychiatric institution against my will. We went way past that for 25 years. And in 2005, again, it was situational. I had a second failed business. I was up on Wall Street trying to get myself back, and I had a lot of anxiety. And if you could picture the scenario, I brought all my research to prove my truth to my mother 25 years after I was mislabeled. And she was fearful. She was frightened. She believed in the medical model. It didn't matter what my history of progress was. So instead of using the help model, she did not humble herself. She did not empathize, listen, or have patience. She called 911 and said, help my daughter. Good meaning. What was beautiful though is the two police officers that showed up at the doorstep, I would say they did humble themselves. They questioned my mother, they questioned me. They did empathize. They were saying, looks like you got a lot of material out here you're trying to share with your mother. They did listen. But here's like the problem between listening and patience. The police officers that responded to 911 listened to my mother by herself, listened to me by myself. They did not have the patience or the skill or the discipline to bring my mother and myself together and say, what's going on here? Looks like she's got a lot of stuff to share. She just was on Wall Street. She's a single mom. How can we have you two talk together? So for me, the patience would be the piece that I would say, first responders, please help families and friends talk together if you have a 911 call on you. Because I would say the first responders did do, the first three, but in 2005, I don't know the laws, but when I spoke to the first responders and saying this is a mistake, they said we have to take you in anyway. And my understanding is they felt bad. So I am a believer in this model. We do want families, friends to get this before they call 911 or 988. But now in the next moment, I'm going to introduce Emily. And Emily's scenario is similar and very different. Emily called 988 by herself. She didn't have 911 called on her. She called in a moment of distress. She called believing 988 would help her. It's been out. Emily was in a situational, and I like the word situational. It doesn't mean you're mentally ill. Emily had a scenario way beyond what we can do today, but you can see her recording describing it. But it was only last year, and Emily is a nationally renowned speaker and advocate for mental health. She has been on television. She's on the speaker circuit. She's on the board of directors of many organizations, and she was on this before this 988 call happened. So just have a perspective, because this woman is a professional. She never thought it was going to happen to her, and she'll show us that it can happen to anyone. And she trusted the 988 system. And I'm not going to say, not that it's all bad, but we need some improvement. And of what happened? What was the situation in 2023? What was the impact when people didn't humble themselves, empathize, listen, and have patience? And what would you have liked to happen? And this is going to literally give you about 3 minutes. So you go and talk. And you have to unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much for inviting me to have a space here to share my story, Janet. I wish my story never happens to anyone. So in California, involuntary hospitalization against your will is called a 5150. And so I often tell people that I have been 5150'd by 988, the National Suicide Hotline, where they broke confidentiality when after I told them that I had seen a security guard, and then they told me to pass my phone to the security guard. That is probably one of my greatest regrets of having interacted with 988. But I was in a moment of feeling very down, and like Janet said, I trusted 988, but that was the last day that I would ever trust 988 ever again. For having 911 called on me, and the my local police department showed up, and uh, I interacted with an EMT, from the fire department. They told me to sit next to him on the gurney, and in the video that Janet will be sending out, the link, I shared that, you know, in the beginning, I was given choice. I was given choice to take a pill or not by the EMT, and I was very coherent. Um, I mean, but in the end, I basically kind of felt criminalized for crying in public, for expressing that I had any suicidal thoughts. And what I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand is the different levels of suicidal ideation. Because sometimes they're just thoughts, but people don't necessarily act on them, because if a person really wanted to kill themselves, they would not call a number like 988. And my feeling is that most of the people who call 988 are simply looking for someone to just listen and validate. But in my experience before 911 was called on me, the crisis counselor from WellSpace Health, contracted by Vibrant Emotional Health to carry out 988 calls, he did not listen. He talked over me. I can't, I don't even remember how 90 minutes passed by so quickly. I talked about things about Van Gogh. And why wasn't he a person who was appreciated for his art during his time? And who's making money off of his artwork now? And so, like, I feel like I want to be an artist. I am an artist, but I want to be appreciated during my lifetime. And the 988 crisis counselor, he just didn't know how to validate, and he'd talk over me. And so it was a very frustrating conversation.
You were
Yeah.
brought into the hospital. You were given a pill. You were given a major bill,
Mm-hmm.
and you were not listened to. You were not empathized with, and there was not patience in the process. And you did get out, thank God. So
Yeah.
just for this tonight, it's you're gonna wrap it up by you paid a price over some X days, and then you got a bill, and you're back. So you are still back.
At this point in time right now, it is not easy for patients to report for abuse in an involuntary hospitalization, because it's just, the system doesn't make it any easier for patients to report abuse. And we have to do that as psychiatric survivors. What psychiatric survivors and rape survivors have in common is no consent was ever required. So we have to speak out. So thank you so much, Janet, for having me here. I think that, for anyone who's goes through a mental health crisis and they're just crying, I think it's just important for people to just let them cry, let them vent, and just let it out, because that's what somatic processing is all about. So I just felt like we can do better.
We can do better. And thank you for the extreme discipline to do that in such a short version. Carlito, I'm going to actually ask you to respond also very short, and then Dr.
Sure.
Calvin.
Yep.
But I'm also going to ask participants to either support Emily and what you understand she went through, or questions. So Carlito, again, comment on the help model of what could have worked in that, and then Dr. Cabelin.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Emily, for the bravery again, just going through almost, I can feel for you and I hear you out. Could have been re-triggering there, but you did a great job getting through that. Anyways, yes, I think certainly listening and understanding and putting yourself in the person's shoes. And I do want to confirm what Emily said, because I find it also true in my case working, is that sometimes people just need to let it out. And I can actually tell, even on a text network, it's just texting back and forth. Once the person comes in and they're very open and they're kind of vomiting a lot of emotions on the screen, they're just typing away a lot of emotions. I let them get it out. And after they get it out, it's almost cathartic enough where just like I've had a lot of comments where people have responded on the crisis line and said, just you listening to me right now was what I needed. And so we check in for that. We certainly do on the lines. We check in for, are you at a calm now, right? We also want to, make sure there's consent. So unfortunately, by all stretch of means, there's not everything is perfect, and people certainly have faults. So I just want to again thank Emily for going through that in a very courageous way without being re-triggered so much. So thank you.